This is the Wandering Mike.
Welcome, everyone, to the Wandering Mike. Today I'm here with John. Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Nice. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. It's going to be a very interesting one, I think. And yeah, I'm excited. Um, so to get us started, if you just want to introduce yourself to the people, tell us a little bit about your life, your journey, anything you want to share.
Yeah, let me just start with how I talk to my clients. Um, as the technology entrepreneur, you built your company because you knew your solution would change people's lives. But right now, instead of changing the world, you're stuck in another meeting trying to get your team to understand what you see so clearly. You can feel that dream slipping through your fingers as everyone around you seems to be speaking a different language. Remember um, that feeling you had when you first started, that absolute certainty that you were onto something that could change people's lives and help so many people. Well, it's still there, but now you're lying awake at 3 a.m. trying to get, uh, everybody around you to understand what you're trying to go do. Your family barely sees you. Your health is failing, and that real world change that you've been dreaming of doesn't isn't there anymore, and you're just trying to figure out, what's going on. Well, let me show you how founders like you can break free from this cycle through three proven pathways. I have the Team Clarity Breakthrough, which gets your team aligned. That's a 3-month program. Your Growth Accelerator, which gets your team keeps your team aligned for scaling your business, making it grow, and that's a 6-month program. And then the Global Impact Builder is one where you're building legacy. You're maybe getting ready for an exit, or you're wanting to spread out globally, and that's a year program. But I help people do these types of things and getting their teams aligned and getting their missions working so that everything is going in the right direction. Now, I do this through a program called Sync. That's Synchronize Yourself Naturally Within Your Community. And that's a program that I put together over 35 years of my professional life working around the world. And so there's different elements that come from different places that I was at in the world that helped me do this program. But to give you a little bit of idea of where I came from and why I'm in this place where I've traveled the world and worked all around the world, it started when I was in a kid. My parents had uh, an inkling to help people out, and so we always had somebody new at our table. We had Navajo indigenous brothers that lived with us for several years. We had humanitarian refugees, um, international exchange students that came from Japan and Germany and Uruguay, and there was always some new face at the table. Along with that, my parents were really into travel, and so I didn't realize how different this was for most people. But by the time I was 22, I had traveled to 19 countries in all 50 U.S. states, and so with that, I was able to get an understanding that my little sector of the world where I was growing up was not really the world that everybody else was growing up in, and I realized that everybody had some value. So my ethos is that everybody is here on Earth for a purpose. And the thing that we need to do is make sure that we understand what that purpose is. So everybody's a piece of the puzzle of life. And then that piece of the puzzle of a company or an organization that you're involved with. And we as leaders need to figure out how we can actually help those people fulfill what their calling is, so that we can fulfill our callings. Because actually having everybody work together in conjunction with everything and all these pieces moving together, or gears of a machine working in tandem, it helps make things work so much better. So what we do as leaders, we need to help put margin around that puzzle piece so that people can grow into it, rather than having a small place for them to put their puzzle piece and them not to have any room to grow. I think it's the growing that actually gets the people to buy into the mission.
All right. Very cool. there was a lot of things that I want to get into from what you just said, and that I'm definitely curious about. Um, I always love to start, or basically try to do it a little bit chronologically. So, starting at the beginning, so to speak, of your journey, and you already gave us a little bit of an insight into where you're coming from and kind of what shaped you early on in your life, which was diversity and travel. So, how did that part, um, maybe in a little bit more detail, influence you, and how did it motivate you to where you were eventually going and um, going into helping these companies and becoming a leader and all these sorts of things? How did the travel part and just meeting different cultures play into all that?
Very good question. Thank you. So, first of all, um, my father had this saying that you should never let your education interfere with your education. So, when I was traveling, and there's other parts of my career, my life that I'll talk about here too, but all these elements give a little corner of a view of what I was going through. So, to understand that there's other people in the world that don't think the same way that I do, that don't look the same way that I do, that speak different languages than I do, just help to broaden my perspective of where I fit in life. And it gave me a real understanding that it didn't matter if, so we had humanitarian refugees in our home. This was a family from Laos. There were six of them. It was a husband and a wife, the husband's sister, and then they had three kids that were like 6, 3, and 1. And they left Laos when they had a civil war. And the thing was that this man was a PhD, and he was an engineer. And the thing that I understood from my parents was that, first of all, these people were a people of means. Okay, they had something, because in order for them to get out of the country, they had to sell things off. So they probably they came to the United States poor, but they had to spend a lot of money to get to be safe and to actually get over here. So as I watched him trying to find a job, and not he was not a native English speaker, and every so it was very difficult for him to be seen for what his value was. And that really kind of sunk in my mind that that it doesn't matter who we are when we're the minority in the area, the place where we are. We feel like we're out of sorts. We're not completely ourselves, and we people don't see us for what we really what the value we have. And I've been in my own situations like that when I lived in Japan for 7 years, and I lived in Taiwan, and I lived in Doha, Qatar. And then I've traveled all over the world. And when you're the minority, you do feel different. Especially when I lived in Japan as long as I did. I'm this Caucasian American that's in these different places, and people are always pointing me out. Okay, and that's not necessarily fun. But it's also, my Japanese, of course, is not as good as the as some other people's. Of course, the natives were speaking really good Japanese, and so I was a little bit nervous about being able to speak in front of people. And so, everything kind of builds on each other. What I think I need to talk a little bit more about my youth. So when I was 9 years old, um, I that's my first time when I understood intuition. Okay, and I had this intuitive moment. It was a Sunday afternoon. We had a lady over for dinner. It was a friend of my parents, and we had seen this lady in a musical production at the theater in town. And so she was at the Playhouse, and we had seen this, and I was really enthralled with the show. And then she came and she was talking about the theater, and something just struck my heart that the theater was something that I needed to get to know. And then she told my mother, she says, "Oh, Nancy, there's going to be tryouts for The Sound of Music. And it's
Mm.
going to be in a month. You ought to go try out." And my mother just kind of said, "Oh, that's silly. I could never do that." And she just, pushed it away. Well, when that lady left, I told my parents that I was supposed to try out for that musical. And my parents kind of said, "Oh, John, that's really cute, but
Right.
you've never seen in front of anybody and you don't even talk to anybody. So, how could you get up on the stage?" And so for a month, I sat there and I would try and tell them at dinner time that I needed to go to this thing or in the car ride to school or whatnot. And finally, 2 days before, I said, "Well, if you're not going to take me, then I'm going to take the bus. And if I took the bus, it would take me into a very dangerous part of town." And so they took me, and I got into the theater, and there was all these people waiting for to be auditioned and everything. So there was this little murmuring, all this noise of people talking and stuff. And my number got called, and I went up on the stage, and I told the accompanist to play Edelweiss. And so I sang. I opened my mouth and I sang, and when I opened my mouth, this big voice came out of this little body, and the room just went silent. And I knew then that I was onto something that I was meant to do. Well, after that, from 9 to 19, I was in, 30 productions. I did some small television stints, and I did some dramatic recordings and some vocal recordings. I was a soloist in the boys choir. And so a whole plethora of things happened. Now, performing was interesting and that was fun. But what I think the reason why I went into the theater was because I learned right on that the theater was like a mini cosmos, and you have this city, okay, that has a mayor, which is the director, and then the director talks to all these different people and gets this city to work together. So in my 9-year-old brain, I thought that the shows were all these stars that are on the stage and that are in the marquee and everything. But I soon realized that the stars are nothing without all the other players intact. So you need to
Mm.
have everybody doing their job, whether it's the people on the lights or the sound or the costumes, the people who write the scripts, the people who build the sets or do the music, and even the people who sweep the floors. Everybody has a place. And if they don't work together, they don't do things well. So in the theater, before the show and during the show, when you're waiting, you go into a place called the green room. And so I learned that if the green room was was vibrant and joyful, and there was a lot of excitement and everything, and everybody was really gelling together, then I knew it was going to be a good show. But if you had like these petty jealousies, if you had people
Mm.
backbiting, if there was just some tension in the room, it wasn't going to be an A+ show. It was going to be a B or B- or whatever. And so I realized that it was really important for community to be put together. So when I look back from my 61-year-old self right now, and I think through all the things that I had in my life, okay, those were stepping stones to get me to where I am right now. And it's easy to look back and see things. You can't necessarily see things going forward. But I did learn about intuition at that point, and really understanding these little images that come in our minds in regards to what it is that we could become. And I learned how to actually um, make that so that it's more intense and everything. But I also learned how to, if I get that little um, intuition coming in, I kind of let it sit for a little bit. If it keeps on pinging me and keeps on coming, then I'll start to research it and try to look at it and try to figure out, what is it I'm supposed to be doing with this, and then ultimately I'll make a decision whether I go forward with it or not. But that part, that theater part, was really part of me, as well as the diversity part that came from the travel and having all these people in the home, and recognizing that everybody's equal and everybody has a value to add. I feel right now that my calling is to help people actually come out of their shells and to understand how they can actually become a better person so that they can actually become a leader who can help other people come out of their shells, and so on and so on. So it's actually trying to give back by giving forward.
Yes. And it is always so beautiful, because that's definitely something that I subscribe to as well. Is well, firstly, that everything happens for a reason, but then that everyone has their own path and how important it is to step into that path. So it is beautiful to hear stories like that in hindsight where you know, things make sense. It's like this is when this happened, this is why um I was in this situation. Um
I would say
so
that even in the even so a lot of what I've said right now, people are probably thinking, oh, he's had a blessed life or whatever, and he's had all these good things happen. But there's been bad things that have happened along the way too, which also, going back to what you were saying, is that those also shaped me. So recognizing when I was bullied in certain situations, or when certain things happened to me, having to deal with that, it's how we deal with it that if we pick ourselves up and move forward and grow from it, then it's good. But if we let it defeat us, then that's not good. So that's what I think is really important, because it's the good and the bad things that we experience that actually create us to who we are, and who we'll become.
yes. And when you were talking about um coming out of one's shell and encouraging that as well, um I just need to ask about that again because it's not a very uh, common life, I would say, to live in these different countries and seeking out these places to work abroad for longer times. So, what was that kind of intentional for you to also get out of your shell? What inspired these stints of just staying in different countries and going abroad for those periods of time?
That's a really good question, and and you've been living different places too, so I know you understand this to a certain extent. But uh, so having traveled at a young age, of course, I get a little bit of wanderlust. Thinking, what's on the other side of the fence? What else is there out there, and what else is there to explore? But also, what else is there to learn? So, learning is
Right.
a big part of this, and I believe that it's really important for us to get out of our comfort zones. Um, and when we get out of our comfort zones, that's when the most growth happens. And so I think that's part of it, but there's just an excitement about, um, doing things globally, doing things, differently, and everything. But, I have to tell you that, sometimes, coming back, to the United States, and I think other people feel this way about going back to their own countries after they lived abroad. It's like your mind is expanded, but other people are still in their own mode. And so a lot of times you come back, and people, you feel like people don't understand you. And so, they're not understanding me. And so all of a sudden you've had these different experiences. But the thing is, I think those experiences of being outside of our norm is what helps us understand what humanity is all about. Because everybody is different. I mean, even if it's the next door neighbor, they're still different than you. And even if you have siblings in your house when you're growing up, you don't grow up the same way. You're different people. And so we need to figure out how we um, celebrate the fact that we have these differences and everything. I think that going abroad is interesting, because not only am I learning about other people, but I'm also able to help other people understand, me or Americans more. And that, so it's kind of like being a mini ambassador, if you will, but that also carries some weight with it too. So it's just a matter of, trying to get outside the comfort zone and recognizing that there's a lot of different ways of thinking, a lot of different ways of putting things together. So that, going back to my sync program, synchronize yourself naturally within your community. um, I learned early on that there were things from all these different cultures that were really meaningful. And we somehow, if we pull those all together, we become a more humane place. We become a more a place that understands each other a little bit better and such. So, and it all kind of goes hand in hand, but really, um, you know, the, it's, well, I have to say again that intuition has been a big part of why I've moved around, because
Mm,
every place that I've gone to, there's been an intuitive moment for it. Okay.
right.
Now, sometimes there was an intuitive moment. Well, I thought was intuitive when I was graduating from university. So before university, I had um, I had finished high school. I went to university for one semester. And then after that, I did 2 year volunteer missionary service for my church in Japan.
Mm,
And so I moved to Japan, and that's where I learned Japanese. And so being totally immersed in the language, and then being at a time when the Japanese economy was just starting to boom, I decided that I wanted to be a consultant and an international consultant in Japan. And so I went back to university and I changed my major to Japanese and business with
mm.
with um, with an Asian studies minor. And with the Asian studies minor, I had to learn Mandarin and Mandarin Chinese and Korean. And so,
Oh, wow.
I was having to do all these different things. And so when I was in Japan, I learned about these different consensus building tools. And so when I went back to university, so I'm still, I'm only starting the second half of my first year. And so I had to take English, either freshman English or a technical writing class. And what my intuition was telling me that I needed to take this technical writing class. And I just thought, this is like really weird. I'm not a technical person. I'm this artsy person. I've been in the theater,
Mm,
and I had originally wanted to go into theater for my college education and for my career. And there's something just told me you need to take this technical writing class. So I took this technical writing class, and we had this project, this semester project. And the project, most of the people, like if it was an engineer, they would have some instructions on how to put a gizmo or something, some machine together. And then the people that were chemists, they would talk about a chemical recipe and what they had to do. So these are really
mm,
highly technical things. But I asked my professor if I could talk about these consensus building aspects of the Japanese culture. So it's Mingi Seido and Nemawashi. And and so she said yes. And so anyway, I got it down to a way that I could talk about it technically and describe it and
mm,
everything. And essentially, that those tools that I learned for that class became what I used throughout my career in regards to how I managed people and managed my life. And so it's just like one thing builds on another. And if we actually listen to that intuition, and even though it sounds crazy, like, this non-technical person actually taking a technical writing class. So what did I
mm.
end up doing in my career was actually working with technologies. So I worked with
Right.
universities and national laboratories, and I took their technologies. It's called technology transfer. And so I would get these nascent technologies, these new technologies that just came off the researcher's desk, and I would have to do triage on them. So I'd have to determine, is it something that is really going to solve a problem that society needs solved? Or is it just
Mm,
something that they've just thought of? And then if it is something valuable, then I needed to determine if we needed to patent it or not. And so then there was intellectual property involved. And so we would patent it. And if we try to patent it, it's very expensive. And so then I have to figure out how to make a prototype out of it, how to make a demonstration model out of it. And then I need to be able to show that to people. So there's a marketing element to that we're trying to get some company to license the technology. And sometimes it would go to an existing company, but oftentimes it would go to an entrepreneur. And then the entrepreneur would put a startup company together. So from those activities at the different places that I've been, I've worked with hundreds of startups. And that's why, I started this out with regards to, working with these people who have had startups, but they've grown to a certain point that they're getting to a place where there's so many people involved that the original mission is kind of getting lost in the mix. And so figuring out how to put that together has really been what I'm trying to do right now. But anyway, dealing with these technologies um, was actually again something that was so out of my norm because I wasn't
Mm,
a science person. But I have become a science person, so I've had to learn how to work with my left and my right brain together in tandem to actually get these things going. And so, um, one thing when I was in college, when I was graduating, I had gone to a career fair, and in this career fair, it was for people gearing towards going to Japan. And I ended up having a bunch of interviews, but one group showed a lot of interest in me, and I was really interested in them. And I don't know if you know the company Guess Jeans, but at the time it was like a really big thing. And so I thought that I could help them go into the Japanese market, and I was really excited about this. But I had several interviews, and I thought I was going to get this job, and then I find out
mm,
that I don't get the job. And I thought, what in the heck? I felt like I had this intuition and everything. But I think I've realized that it was my desire, okay, was overshadowing what was actually supposed to happen. And so
mm,
if I had been offered that job and taken that job, then I would not be where I'm at today. I would be in a completely different situation. And so I'm actually grateful for that setback. But I was really devastated at the time. And so but from that, I was offered a position with Jetro, which is the Japan it's an external organization. The Japanese government has an external organization that does trade relations. And so I was going to go
mm,
there and do some activities for them in Hiroshima. So my wife, who's Japanese, we moved to Japan, and we didn't know where we were going to go yet. We knew that we were going to go to Japan, and we were hoping we would go to Tokyo because that's where her family was from.
mm,
But I get this offer to go to Hiroshima, and I basically said no. I don't think I'm supposed to go to Hiroshima. I was supposed to stay in Tokyo. And so I didn't take that job, but I took another job as a translator and a salesperson for a public relations company. And this was a small Japanese firm that was helping American and Western companies come into Japan, and then Japanese companies go to America. And and so I did this for a year, but during that year, I was approached by somebody that I met at church, and that person had said, "I've been watching you," and he goes, I'd like to propose something to you." And that proposal was, he had this consulting company, and that's really what I wanted to be as a consultant. He had this consulting
mm,
company that that he had he'd been doing for several years, and then he was also involved in another company. This other company wasn't doing well, and so he needed to put his time towards that. And so then I came in his company as a director right off. And so
mm.
I at a very young age, I was able to actually meet with all these different people from these different electronics manufacturers in Japan, the presidents and the vice presidents of Sony and JVC
Mm.
and all these different places. And if I had taken that guest job, I would never have had this opportunity. And the thing was that I was really wanting to be a consultant, but I took this PR job, not knowing exactly what I was going to do, but I felt good about it. And then things fell into place. So it's just one of those things where you need to let life guide you into things, and not kick things out that you don't think should be there. Just kind of go with the flow, and going with the flow actually helps you, you know, have a lot more opportunity to grow and develop and do things that you would never think that you were going to be doing before.
Yeah. Um, your life sounds so interesting. I feel like I could ask a million questions about all the different things that you have done. But um, to take it more generally, um, so you talked about the things that you learned from the Japanese culture, the consensus building techniques that you said were really, really relevant. And you now just mentioned about how you got the chance to be thrown into an environment where you just interact with a lot of people um, that you can learn from. So I feel like um, and this is a big deal to you, is like making sure that people learn, that people grow. But obviously, that has been a big part of your own journey as well. So, how, because I feel the same way that this is the most important thing that we should do, but it might maybe not be um, it's easy to everyone to really accept that role of I need to learn from these people rather than maybe, to put it more negatively, be envious or jealous. So how was it for you to be in the mindset of I'll take all of these influences and I learn from them. I see how people do things and I use them for myself.
So let me step back a little bit. And so I was at the University of Illinois for 12 and a half years. And I first started at the University of Illinois as a consultant. This was after I was in Japan for 7 years. And so, uh, um, as a consultant in a university where they have these full time positions, which are tenured and everything, when you're coming as a consultant, you're kind of like, you know, a half blood, if you will. I don't know.
Mm.
It's kind of weird because they don't think of you as having lots of value. But, I have to say that no matter where I've worked, and I flipped hamburgers at Wendy's. I delivered pizzas for Domino's when I was in high school and stuff. But, no matter where I've worked, I've always felt the need to make sure that I add value to where I go. And so when I was at the University of Illinois, I became, uh, one of the people at the top in regards to my production, working with these technologies and licensing them out and bringing in revenue for
Mm.
the university and getting, accolades for the university, but also for the researchers and everything. And so I had all these things going on, but I wasn't feeling really good about myself. And I was kind of stuck. I felt stuck. And other times when I felt stuck at other jobs, I would kind of think, okay, so how do I get out of this? What's the next step? Please help me, and everything. But I it just didn't feel like it was time to leave, and so I just kind of stuck it out. And at a time when my wife had some major conflicts happening in her life, and she had this full blown depression take place. And then
Mm.
because of my state of mind and everything, and I was worried about her, and we have 6 kids, and trying to
Okay.
figure out how we deal with this, I became depressed, and so I actually understand what depression feels like. That feeling that you're in this hole, this dark cavern that you feel like you can't get out of, and so um, I was able to work with a counselor and everything, and along with my wife, and so I slowly but surely got out of it. But at the time, I had a friend at work who um, was constantly getting into trouble because of his mouth. Okay, he would say things that he would just say whatever's on his mind, and so he ended up having to have a coach. And when he came back from this coaching sessions, I would just pick his brain in regards to what happened during the coaching session. And it just actually really intrigued me as to what was going on. And, uh, and after, several months of watching him progress and grow through this activity, I went to my boss and I said, so does somebody have to be in trouble to get a coach, a professional coach?
Mm.
Can somebody else get a professional coach? And she says, oh, John, you can get a coach. She goes, well, find one for you. And I said, well, you don't have to look far. I want the one that he has. And so ultimately, I was able to have this coach, and I had the coach for about a year. And I really feel blessed that the university paid for this, because it brought me out of my shell. And then, again, this is a shell that I made myself in a way, because of my situation. But I was feeling like I wasn't assertive enough. I wasn't um, taking charge. I wasn't letting people know my value. I wasn't even demanding that they recognize the stuff that I've done. And so with this coaching, it actually built my confidence level up. And within 2 years, I ended up getting a job that was much higher than the job that I was at. And then 5 years after that, I took a bigger job, which was actually really an incredible dream job. And if I hadn't actually gone through and felt the depths of despair and then done the
Yeah.
asking to get some help here. And asking is like through prayer or through meditation and stuff, but actually going through the steps and asking my boss, to have this coach, um, you know, getting that type of a blessing was very very helpful. And I've learned that having mentors and coaches to help guide you was really important. Now the thing is that when I was in music, during from 9 to 19, I had probably what six different music teachers going up different levels. Okay, vocal teachers, and then I had different acting teachers, and so I had coaches, and so I always thought of coaching as like you have to learn, a trade or and have to experience something. You have to be able to a talent. You need to develop it so you have a coach. But I never thought that coaches were something that you could develop yourself. But I soon learned that's what that was. Now, what's interesting about coaches is that they don't tell you what to do. What they do is they give you guidelines and tell you, you know, uh, ask you questions in regards to what it is you think you want to do. And then they ask you questions in regards to, well, what if you do it this way? And what if you do it that way? And then they give you the leeway to actually make the decision for yourself. But it's based on their experiences. They'll provide, feedback from what they've done and gone through, or even what their clients have gone through. Of course, everything's confidential, but but they'll say, somebody else was in a situation like this, and this is what they did. So you get
Right.
all these glimpses of understanding what's happening, and that actually helps build, you know, this confidence that you can actually make these decisions for yourself. So even now, I have my own coaches. Okay, I'm a coach, but I have coaches that help me get to my next level,
Yeah.
and so I'm a real believer in coaches. Now, another thing that I'm a believer in is that uh, is reading and reading books that are out there that are self improvement, leadership development, talent development, whatever it is you think you need to develop. There is a book on it. There's videos on it. Just I would say that. So I'm fortunate because when I was in Doha, Qatar from 2013 until 2022, and in August of 2022, I moved back to the States. And then I still worked for the Cutter Foundation. Um, and and so I still worked at the Cutter Foundation for them here in the States. But when we were in Qatar, we rescued two dogs. They're Salukis. It's a desert greyhound.
Mm.
So they're bigger than the greyhound. But because they're like a race dog, they need to have lots of exercise. So I take these dogs out every day for about an hour, and so while during the hour I'm listening to Audible books in my ear. And so every week I'm able to go through about 2 books a week. And so there's a
Nice.
lot of information that's always constantly going through me, because I'm trying to, you know, get myself to a better place, but also understand how I can augment the things that I'm going to be helping other people with, and how do I become a better person. So all those things are like put together. But anyway, I'll leave it at that right now.
Um, well, I know what question I'm going to ask next, but I also have to, as someone who loves books and I do love reading, I cannot take that, like leave that chance and pick your brain because every time someone says that they love reading as well, and I know it's hard, just from the top of your head, but um, do you have like a book or maybe two that you would say in the moment that shaped me the most that you would recommend me read?
So one of my favorite books is The Alchemist. And this is from
Mm.
Paulo Coelho. And so The Alchemist is about a shepherd, and and he has this dream of going to the pyramids. He's in Spain, and he has this dream to go to the pyramids, and so So it talks about how he goes through life, and it's called The Alchemist because he comes in contact with an alchemist, and the alchemist lets him know that the things that he's seeing are omens. Okay, and the omens are things that are like intuitive moments, think that the life telling him where to go, and he needs to look for these omens. And so as an allegory for even my own life, because he fact his wife, on his trail to Egypt. I found my wife, of course, I found her at the university, but she was from Japan, and if I hadn't gone to Japan, I would never have met her. So this it's kind of an allegory, but it's just a great story that helps people understand, you know, what what is inside ourselves is very potentially valuable, and how we have to pull that out and we have to work for it to actually go through things. And sometimes we have trials and everything that he got stuck in a place where he got robbed, and so he had to work, for somebody for a while. And then as he worked there, he actually made the place better, and the place made lots of money. And so then he was able to
Yeah.
actually, you know, take care of that past money that he lost, and then move forward. And so that's just kind of like how life is. So that's one thing. Um, Another book is Green Lights from Matthew McConaughey, which helps people understand, um, again, like the process of life. And he calls these things green lights. Whenever he sees, something ahead of him, it'll be either red or green. And the ones that are green, he'll go forward with. And these are like different opportunities that come up that you can't imagine would come up, but you're wishing for. And then they come because you wish for them and you work for them, you work hard for them. Um, there's a whole bunch of things that I could talk about, um, in regards to that. There's things on leadership, and there's things on, personal development. I'm just looking at uh, my list here, from audiobooks, and uh, the 5 levels of leadership is really good. There's just so many good things in here. It's just crazy. Um, it really depends on what somebody was looking at, that I could tell you what book would be good for that particular thing. So, but those
Right.
ones are ones that are really, um, help you come to more terms in regards to yourself and everything. And then other ones are, trying to figure out, how you deal with certain issues, or how you work as a leader, or how you how you organize an organization and such.
Right. Yeah. Definitely gonna check out. I have actually read The Alchemist, but I could not recommend that more myself as well. I really love the story, and um, I love Matthew McConaughey, and I listen to a lot of his podcasts that he does as well. But I've never actually read his book, so that's something I will do now. Now that you recommended the book as well. Um,
It's a very
yeah.
refreshing book. Just the way he brings up life in such a vibrant way that only Matthew McConaughey can do. I mean, it's 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 not technical, but there's lots of ways to actually become a better person because of what you learn from him.
Right. Um, so yeah, I really appreciate that little detour into some book recommendations. Um, so you were talking also about the importance of coaches, of mentors, and um, that's something you said as well. Is um, you you're not really, or at least that's also how I kind of interpret it. Is you're not saying like do exactly this and then you will get exactly that, but it is more shaping people, and obviously with asking these questions like you've said and trying to find out what is important for people. It's not as easy as asking questions, but you have to have the experience to know um, what kind of questions are important, what kind of things are important to go into more as well, to discover more. So, um, as you've mentioned, the programs that you do yourself that help companies, and obviously these are all different things as well, because we talked about team clarity, you talked about growth, acceleration, and then you talked about a global impact um, as well. Um, so yeah, I guess I can't really ask a broad question like that, but wh- where would you say people get started if we take it back to a person themselves and they kind of wanna sort their own thing, the thing close to them, out in perspective of purpose and meaning. Where would you start?
So, um, I'll tell another story here. So, in 2020, we're in the middle of COVID. I'm living in Doha, Qatar, and my wife. So we had gone to Qatar in 2013. My wife had promised me 5 years, and so here we're now 2020, and we're at 7 years. And my wife had moved back to the States with our youngest daughter, who was in high school, and she was the reason why we moved back to Washington State was because in our city, our town, they have a school program. It's actually a state program where it's called Running Start. The students that are juniors and seniors in high school, so the third and fourth year in high school, that um, they're able to take those at the junior college, and they can graduate from high school, but also get an associate's degree at the same time. So this was a really
Oh,
good thing for
wow.
my daughter. And so they moved back. So I'm in Doha by myself in during COVID. And so we're in lockdown. And of course, I'm doing work during lockdown, but in the nights and the weekends and everything, what am I doing to try and figure out myself out?
Mm,
I decided that, well, my intuition was telling me that I needed to write a book. And so I ended up taking this book writing class, and one of my coaches was Jack Canfield. I don't know if you know the series Chicken Soup for the Soul. Um, uh, it's sold worldwide. Sold 600 million copies. So he's a very impressive person. So I'm talking with him and the other coaches, and the first meeting we have, which is on Zoom, he looks at my name, John Taylor McEntire, and and he says, John Taylor McEntire. He says, we have the same name. And I said, what do you mean? Your name's Jack. And he says, no, I was born John Taylor Canfield. And I said, oh, you're kidding. And I said, well, where did Jack come from? And he tells the story about how his aunt had a son named Jack, and that son had died in a car accident or something, some traumatic thing. And so she took a liking to Jack, or to John Taylor. And he ended up living with her, and she ended up supporting him to go through a military prep school for high school. So it was a very expensive school, and so he had his whole life was changed, and so then he was called Jack, and ultimately, when I was telling him what I wanted to write, I told him I wanted to write about consensus building. And one of the things that he told me was, he says, consensus building, that sounds really cool and everything. He goes, but can you really write a whole book about consensus building? And at the time I thought I could. And
mm,
but then as I got into it, in his talking to me, it helped me understand that wasn't enough, okay, to do the thing on. And so that's where ultimately, over the years, the Sync program came about, and that's what the book became. But I ended up writing a book with him called The Keys to Authenticity. Well, you're seeing it backwards, okay?
mm.
And he was the first chapter, I'm the second chapter, and there's 20 other chapters in here of different people. But one thing that's interesting is that he signed this book for me, and he signed it, um, uh, John Taylor Canfield, AKA Jack Canfield. And so anyway, he has been a coach of mine for the last 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And And so I've learned a lot from him. I've learned a lot from his partners, and so they've been coaches of mine. And I've taken coaching in regards to not just book writing, but also um, the reason why we wrote this book together was because he has a program called the Success Principles, and so I went through the courses to learn the Success Principles myself, and then I decided I wanted to be a trainer for the Success Principles. And so I'm a master trainer for the Success Principles, and I've worked alongside with Jack and everything. But the you part, the yourself part of the sync system, the synchronize yourself naturally within your community, that yourself part is actually how do you become a servant leader, and that's where those success principles lie. And so this is where how these pieces of this puzzle come together with all of these different elements and everything. And so I still he's still my coach, and he's still a mentor. And there's other mentors that I've had to help me in regards to speaking and doing funnels for, you know, working with sales and stuff, and those types of things. Um, but each little item that I feel like I'm weak in, that's where I try to get some expertise, whether it's through a book or through a coach or through both is where I found the value. And what I've learned in all my coaching that I've received is that it's really when we step out of our comfort zones that we actually gain the most value. If we stay in the comfort zone, we get stuck. And every once in a while, I still get stuck, and I get in my head, and I need to recognize that I need to pull myself out of my head and everything. But there's always a mentor there that helps me out. So I hope that's a story that helps answer your question there.
It does. Um, it really does. And I just, yeah, try and ask a little bit more about the things that you have mentioned, and maybe because I am enjoying these stories, and maybe another one will serve this. Um, so actually, when you talked about synchronizing yourself naturally in the community, one part that I'm always very interested is also the part of community. So when you because obviously I don't know what your program entails specifically, when you talk about community in that sense, what are you talking about, and how far or how narrow reaching is that community?
Yeah, a very, very good question. And it's a very deep answer. But so remember when I told you about the story about when I got into the theater, understanding the community was really that whole cosmos, that whole universe, that city, together doing some amazing thing. And how things really go well when we gel together, when we really recognize that we can feed off of each other, and we can actually make each other be stronger, so that the pieces separately have a certain value, but together they're much more valuable because of how we put it together. And so that's part of the community. In the synchronized part, I talk about the orbs of influence. And so the orbs of influence are you have your own orb, and then if you report to somebody, then they have their orb, and you need to be conjoined. Okay. Otherwise,
Right.
you're not fulfilling the mission. And so I call them orbs instead of spheres because a sphere is too perfect. Okay. A sphere is like, completely round, and it seems like it's a little bit solid, and it's not moldable. But an orb is something that's more organic. And so you have your orb and this orb that you report to, or orbs that report to you. And then you have, you get those all aligned. And then you have another layer, which this next layer is those groups that are outside of your initial, group. And these are people like your suppliers, your vendors, your virtual assistant. If you're, you may be a solopreneur, and these people are outside yourself, but you need to bring them in. And so I tell people, if they're a solopreneur, if they're a small group, that when they're talking to people, and if they're trying to have, they should have a monthly board meeting. And this board meeting should not just be, people in the company or the organization, but it should be people who are just outside the company that actually help them do the things they're doing. So if these are vendors and suppliers and such, they if they're the more they're included in your discussions, the more that they are going to understand how they can help you. Okay. And the more willingness they'll have to helping you, and they'll feel connected. And so they'll be bought in also. So then the next layer is actually your collaborators and competitors. And the idea is to try and make your competitors collaborators instead of competitors. So where can you feed off of each other? Where can you work with each other? And then you also have potentially investors in that same area. And then it's outside of that, which is your clients. So it's all these people that you go through to get to the client. And um, so the naturalized part has stuff to do with intuition, like I said, but it also has to do with um, when you're, do you know Sun Tzu and the Art of War, the book, The Art of War?
Yes.
Okay, that's one of my favorite books. I read it every year at the end of the year because I'm getting ready for the next year. Okay. And so it's a strategy book. And people think, well, why would you have the art of war? Why would you be talking about war and everything? But this General Sue was not, he was a military strategist, but his goal was to win a war without having to fight any battles. And so
Yeah.
how do you do that? You do that by, you know, understanding your enemy, getting them onto your side. How do you make it so that you win these battles without fighting? And so it's that kind of discussion that we have on the naturalized size part that gets us into community. So you have your orbs of influence. You've got the strategy part. There's another part in naturalized which is called nunchi, and this comes from Korea. And in Korea, the Koreans are very good. I've been in many boardrooms in Korea and different networking events, and they kind of really are prone to see the room as it is, and they look and they figure out how they fit in or not, and they try to determine what they need to do to fit in better or not. So they're taught very young as to this impressionable aspect of life around you, and how do you deal with that. So we talk about that, which gets us into community again. So one thing about the yourself, which goes along with um, the success principles. What I learned from working around the world, I have always had a number of colleagues that were from the Philippines. And I don't know if you've ever worked with anybody from the Philippines, but they're usually very bright and cheery and happy. And they work really, really hard. Their work ethics are hard. Their morals are very strong. They're always smiling. They're always just doing everything to the nth degree. And I was just trying to figure out what makes these people tick. How come they're always so on task and everything? And I came across something that was in the tourist industry in the Philippines, and it's called the 7 M's of service. These M's are Tagalog words, but it's things like um, empathy and caring and excellence, and really going out of your way to help somebody out. So so when we put those types of things in, then we can become a servant leader. And if we become a servant leader, then we're able to help people get out of themselves, which helps us get out of ourselves because we're always giving back. And that gets us into community also. So when we're in community, I told you that I had, Navajo indigenous brothers. And, I learned a little bit about the tribal aspects from them. But when I went to the Middle East, when I was living in Doha, um, I, I really got a feel for what this tribal aspect was all about. And I learned that, there's certain things, just like in anything, there are certain things that are good and there's certain things that you don't necessarily want to have. So we don't want to have the silo effect that comes from tribal activity. You don't want people, thinking in silos, but you want everybody to think as a group. So the tribal aspect, there's a thing that they have in Arabic, which is called majlis. It's Majlis, majlis. And what it is, it's like in America we would call it a man cave. So it's a tent,
Mm.
and the tents are in the backyards of these Arab men, and it's a place where all the group comes together, and you have people from all walks of life and all parts of society, and the hierarchy, so that the older people and the very young people, and the older people are training the young people, and the older people are learning from the young people what's coming up, and they're dealing with tradition and progress at the same time. And what's interesting is that these moduluses, there's an unwritten, well, it's I guess it's a written rule, but you let anybody in the modulus, and so even your enemies can come into the modulus. And people would say, well, why would you let your enemies in? Well, it's because you never know when your enemy is going to become your friend, and you want them to become your friend, and so they let them in, and they give them their Arabic tea and their sweets and everything, and then they have these discussions. And so a lot of the things that we see that are going on in the Middle East right now are actually done. These negotiations are done in this modulus type environment. So learning from the modulus, I've recognized the value of of being having tradition, but also having progress in there at the same time, and having the support of all these different generations working together for the same goal. And so that's one part of community that's necessary. And then in other parts of the world, like especially in Polynesia and in New Zealand, there's different different parts of healing. Okay, so we have these relationships with people, and we have there's a fight that breaks out, an argument or whatever, and sometimes they become really violent and everything. Well, these healing activities that come from these different Polynesian cultures are actually really special. And we need to be able to, as leaders, recognize when we need to use these types of tools in our groups to heal, to bring people together, to make sure that we're all on the same page. So you said that you had asked a question. You said, I don't know if you can do this, if it's more general or if it's very specific, but I know that my calling right now, and I really feel it's a calling, it's like a mission, is to help this polarized world come together in the way that I can do it. And it's not like doing everybody, but it's like in any place that I can help people become unified and recognize that we are much more alike than we are dissimilar. If we can understand that that it's our differences that actually bring character into our groups, and that we can learn from each other, then we're going to be much more valuable as a group and organization than we can be. So the reason that we're here together is something to make sure that we're building off of each other rather than pushing each other away. And so I feel that I'm working with the companies, these technical technology companies first, because that's where I have expertise in regards to all these different technological areas and the markets and everything, and I have a lot to provide them. But I see that the sync method is something that I would use for hospitals, for school boards, for political groups, for churches. You know, it's something that it's actually meant for everybody. And so, um, but the thing is, you can't do everything for free, and so I have to work on something where I'm getting paid for it at first, so that I can give back more later, and everything. And so that's why I focused on the area that I am, and the area that I feel I'm best geared towards. But the goal is that the sync method would help bring groups together and unify things in a different way than they've been able to do them before.
Yeah, that definitely is a very important thing. And that is why I asked about community specifically as well. Because, and I feel like well, I always like to be optimistic anyway, but I generally feel like we are going towards more of that again, where we are finding the similarities, where we are unifying, and where we um, do realize again that we need to help each other, and that we can help each other, and everyone can help everyone. And like we said as well, everyone can learn from everyone as well. Um, so I do see that development slowly taking place as well.
One
Um,
thing that one thing that my company's name is Mutual Prosperity, and the reason why I have that name is because I feel that um, whenever I was in a negotiation for a license or for, you know, selling something, whatever, it's always got to be a win-win situation. Um, you can't
yeah,
have something where somebody is getting, a bigger piece of the pie than somebody else. It has to be, not that it has to be equal, but it has to be equitable. And
yeah,
depending on what the value is. So when I was helping to get these startups going, uh, with these different companies that were coming out of these universities and national laboratories, there were some of them that would be successful, and they would get to a point where they were being bought out. And so, what I was seeing and what I was distressing over was, oftentimes in the buyout, the founders, they come out really well, but the team that's around them who helped them get to that point, they often get lost in the shuffle. And so,
yeah,
um, what happens is that this bigger company that buys this small company, they're interested in the product and the service, but they're also interested in that entrepreneurial activity, that innovation that comes out of this group. And so when they buy the company and everything, the stock price for that big company skyrockets. And it's usually 3 or 4 years later that they're starting to lose these people because they haven't been utilized right, and then the stock price actually plummets. It goes down lower than it was at the beginning. And so I'm thinking that there's just so much value that's actually being lost there, that somehow, when those two groups come together, um, we need to make sure that they're doing some of these consensus building things. And I should probably talk about Nemawashi, but I'm planning on having 3 Nemawashi centers around the world, and this would be a place where,
yeah,
when these types of um, mergers and acquisitions take place, that the top people from each company comes together, and for a week we work through a new mission, we work through a new vision, we work through new goals, so that they can actually get the value out of that whole organization, and that all these people that are inside the organizations, both sides, they can feel like they're still valuable and they can still have a place there, and that they'll still want um, to go forward because they're feeling appreciated. Oftentimes, people from the big company, they'll start to become antibodies against the people in the small company, and it kind of is cannibalism. And so all of a sudden, these people in the small company, they're feeling like they're not wanted or anything. And so the thing that the big company was actually looking for, in that innovation and that spark of entrepreneurship, it gets eaten away by the people who are threatened by that. And so somehow that needs to be made so that everybody comes together. Well, let me explain Nemawashi, guys, because I don't think I explained that yet. Yeah, so there's this term called Nemawashi, which is a technical term for gardeners in Japan, over history. And basically, the bonsai masters, the people who do the bonsai trees, the beautiful
yeah,
asymmetric trees and everything. They're clipping and pruning and everything, and they also use wires to keep them tame and such, and keep them to the size that they want. But it's not just what goes on the outside that's important. They actually do something with the roots, and this is what's called nemawashi.
yeah,
So ne means a root, and mawasu means to dig around the roots. So you're basically giving the roots room to breathe. Okay, you're aerating them, and you're giving them, you're taking away the stuff that's clogging them up and everything. So it's become not just a technical term for gardeners, but it's become a cultural term for Japanese. And basically, what it means is that if you're digging around the roots, basically you're setting the groundwork. You're doing the groundwork to get something going first. So when when you're wanting to start a new project, or in influence somebody to do something different, you use this Nemawashi technique to set the ground, to set the stage for what you want to do. Um, so that's where you're getting people to come to the same page. And there's another part what's called Ringi Seido, and that's Ringi, which means circle. And then Seido
Mm.
means system. And Seido is Seido. And Ringi Seido is the system the Japanese use to make decisions. And so in the US and the Western world, a lot of decisions are made from top down. And I don't think that top down is really the most efficient or effective way to actually make decisions, because when somebody gets it at the different levels, they may have different values or different ways of thinking about what was meant. But if you actually do the Ringi Seido system, what you're doing is that it's not the top that's saying that something's wrong; it's the bottom, okay, that's saying that. Say it's the people on the factory floor. They're thinking that, hey, think the factory is not moving as it needs to, or we need somebody else here where we don't have somebody, or we need to make some movements, some adjustments. And so these people down at the bottom would then do that type of thing, and make some type of plan. And then they would go to their manager here as a middle manager. And this middle manager would then say, oh, that looks really good. Why don't you think about this and think about that? And so they kind of come up with they enhance the plan. And then once it's enhanced, this manager takes it over to another middle manager, who then takes it to their team of people who have to work with this other team. And so then it gets enhanced that way. And then ultimately, this whole thing, which is called a Ringi show, the show is paper, so it's the circular paper is what it's called. You get that together, and then that goes up to the shacho, who is the CEO, and then the shacho goes ahead and puts their hanko, which is their stamp on it. And once they get that stamp of approval, then everybody actually knows what their marching orders are, and then they go forward, really quickly. So when you think about, I don't know if you've heard the term Kaizen. Kaizen is continual improvement, okay? And that's also a consensus building thing. So these are all interrelated, okay? So if you're going to have a factory, if you're going to have a company, if you're going to have a group, you need to make sure that you're always in sync, and that you're working for the same goal and everything. So this Nemawashi Center is really, how do you get all these players, from these two different organizations together and get them in sync so that they understand what the new mission should be, and that they're included in that discussion, so that they get the buy-in from both teams, both sides, so that they can actually again hit the ground running when the whole merger happens.
All this is so interesting, especially with like keeping in mind that these things are done in Japan. Because one of the things that you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation as well is um, how important it is to, like, as a leader, um, grow an environment where, or basically provide an environment rather where people can grow into and where people can feel important and find their purpose. And I remember thinking, well, that's a question I'm definitely going to ask him about because this sounds so like so impossible nowadays. But then you present these these techniques that they do in Japan, and yeah, it just makes you think like we're probably not doing everything in the best way. Yes.
And I think I look at because I've been in the high tech world, and I have no problem with people who founded companies of making lots of money. They can make as much money as they want. What I do have a problem with, though, is that when when there's such a disparity in regards to what they're making versus what other people are making, when they're still adding value to that product. And so I think there needs to be an understanding that these leaders, Steve Jobs did not do everything in Apple by himself. He was a leader who put components together, who was able to see a vision. Design was really important to him, and utility was very important to him. And so he could see how those pieces put together. But he gave the roles to other people around him and everything. But Apple is a good example of pretty much cohesiveness in regards to how they go forward. There was a time when in Microsoft where things had fallen apart, about 10 years ago, and there was a lot of disparity, and people were not feeling congealed and everything. And so the new CEO came in, and when he came in, he brought in actually some Eastern thought and everything. And Microsoft is actually a much different place than it was, 2 decades ago. And so there needs to be this understanding that community, without community, these companies would not become what they are. And without the leaders, they wouldn't become what they are. So we need to make sure that everybody is treated fairly in regards to the parts that they've been putting together. So I'm not saying that everybody should become a billionaire. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that there is wisdom in making sure that people feel like they're part of the process, that they have that margin around their piece of the puzzle, that they're able to give their all, because then they'll be willing to give their all because they're getting so much back because people are appreciating what they're doing. I mean, I've been in organizations where I didn't feel like I was appreciated, and it's just like it feels terrible, and you just wonder, what is it? What else do I have to do? Well, a lot of that again is in our mindset. If we allow ourselves to be treated that way, then we're going to continue in that path. But if we pick ourselves up and figure out, okay, I need to figure out how to deal with my background, my past, my trauma that I've grown up in, and get over that so that I can go to the next level that I'm supposed to do. And then how do I help others, excel to their level? And by doing it together, we have a much more ability to help the world than if we go by ourselves.
It was such a beautiful sentence. I feel like I genuinely have picked your brain enough, John. We have really had a superb conversation, and along the stories you told me, learned a lot already. So, well, yeah, just thank you for all these insights. Um, so for everyone that this also resonated with, and when they want to find out more about the things that you already mentioned, a lot of the resources that you have, but maybe also things we haven't mentioned yet. So, where can people find more about you, more about your stuff, and all and any links I will obviously put in the description as well, so you can easily find it. So yeah, where can we find you online?
So my full name, John Taylor McEntire, for LinkedIn. That's where you'll find me there. There's actually another John McEntire with the same spelling of the last name, and he's a drummer in Chicago.
Oh,
So I had to separate from him. And that's why I have my middle name in there. So, so,
right.
so you don't get me mixed up with the drummer. You got the Taylor in there. And then mutualprosperity.com is my company URL. And then we'll provide, the TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, via the linkages there. I would like to let people know that next week I do have a book that's coming out, and that book is called "I Quit: How to Lose Your Job and Find Your Dream Career." Now, again, like the other book that I showed you, "The Keys of Authenticity." This is also an anthology, and so I have one chapter in this book, and my chapter is called the Intuitive Maverick: Navigating Career Transitions with the Sync Method. And so this is actually talking about how I have a son who's a surfer, and I've learned from
Mhm.
that surfers have to look forward to see where the waves are going, but they have to look backwards to see where the wave is coming from and to see which waves they want to ride and which ones they don't. And so then that, along with the alchemist theory of intuition and looking for these omens, that's what I'm talking about in regards to being this intuitive maverick, and trying to find how you guide your career. Every job that I've taken, I've had some type of intuition that's guided me towards that. And sometimes I've gotten into a job and I felt that job why am I in this situation? Because it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but ultimately something comes up, and I see that was just a placeholder for me to get to another point. So that book, again, how I quit, how to lose your job and find your dream career. That'll be on Amazon on the 14th, and all the proceeds for this book are actually going to help the victims of the hurricanes Milton and Helene. So I would suggest that you pick that up, and you'll learn a lot of things from about it was 19 authors from around the world that are giving their takes in regards to what happens when you have these hiccups in your career, and how you go forward.
Very cool. So yeah, by the time this airs, the book will definitely be out. So I'll put a link to that as well. And yeah, it's such a good opportunity to learn from different people. Like you said, it's cool to have different insights basically collected into one. Um, so yeah, make sure to check that out. Um, yeah, so just again, John, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for sharing your journey with us, sharing all your insights and all the wisdoms you have acquired with us. I really enjoyed it. I really learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. So enjoy the rest of your day and bye, everyone.
Goodbye.